Hi there, my name is Wayne Hedlund, and today we are going to talk about how to utilize Asana to facilitate team meetings. Now, before I go there, I just want to mention to you, way back when I was in grade school, we used to play marbles out in the playground at recess, and I don't know if anyone's ever had that experience. I'm not sure if that happens too much anymore, but we'd put this circle in the ground in the dirt, and we'd throw a bunch of marbles in the middle of that circle, and we'd each have our little shooter marble, and we'd take turns shooting our shooter into that circle and trying to knock out these marbles. And if we knocked the marble out, it was kind of a win. We accomplished something, and we'd knock that marble out and we get to keep it. And every once in a while, if our shooter marble got stuck inside the circle, then our opponents could actually try to knock out our shooter marble with their shooter, and then they get to keep our shooter. Anyways, it was a lot of fun. I remember enjoying it thoroughly, especially when I won. But the goal was to get all of the marbles out of the circle as a team before recess got over. And when I think about this concept of leading great meetings, I realize that it kind of sometimes reminds me of that game of marbles. Each marble in the circle represents our different agenda items, and we're just shooting, we're just trying to get them out, and sometimes we'll just go forever trying to get 3 of them out. The rest of them are still stuck there. We end our meeting with all kinds of things that we did not talk about, and sometimes we didn't even prioritize or organize what we needed to talk about. And there's also something that happens in meetings where we have to be able to be flexible, make changes right in the middle of the meeting, change our agenda, etc. And so I was, realizing, wow, this is kind of how meetings can be, and we don't want that. What I want to talk to you about today is how you can use Asana to really strengthen and maximize your use of meetings so that hopefully they're not too boring. And some of that has to do with how you lead the meeting and how you facilitate it. But some of it can just be about how we organize and manage it on the back end. So I'm going to show you how to use Asana to facilitate meetings. And we're going to create one project that will be kind of an evergreen, not kind of, it will be an evergreen project. That is a project that we'll use over and over and over. It's the same project. It's not a template. And in this project, various other members of our team can add agenda items in. Of course, if I am the team leader, I have the ultimate control over, what our agenda is going to be and what not. And so today we're going to discuss and talk about how this can work. And I'll before we jump to the screen and look at what we're doing, I'll also mention to you that Asana has created for us. If you open a new project and go into some of the samples that they have, you can actually download an agenda, a meeting agenda that they have created, and certainly that will work. But what we're going to do today is go way beyond that. We're going to create some automations and rules so that Asana will do some thinking for us. We're going to hire Asana to work for us, as it were, as our personal assistant. And we're also going to look at how we can integrate more into a meeting agenda. So let's go ahead and go to our workspace here and look at how this can work. So right now what you'll see here, of course, is it's just called a team meeting. This is an evergreen project, so I went ahead and picked a green color and a couple of people to show that it's a team meeting. Also, you can come in here and probably we would maybe change this. If this was my marketing team, maybe we would do something like this. So, marketing team meeting or HR team meeting or whatever it is, so that kind of we can clarify, because we can use this same template for several different meetings. If there's an executive meeting and they meet separately from others, or a staff meeting, we can go ahead and use this tool. Oftentimes we'll star that, which means it'll show up in our starred section there if we need to. You'll notice as well that I've got a bunch of people who are part of the team. Now, we're in a demo workspace, so these are just kind of obviously some interesting characters in my marketing team. However, you don't necessarily have to invite all of your team members into the team meeting if the team meeting is public. If it's public inside a team that everyone has access to, you don't need to invite them if you don't want to. I will add, though, you want to manage notifications. For instance, I probably wouldn't need all of the team members to get pinged or get emailed or notified in their inbox if every time we add an item. However, maybe as the team leader, I want to know whenever people add items in there, so I can in advance as the team leader, I have an opportunity to just kind of know, hey, oh, you added that item into the agenda. I can talk to them offline and say, hey, let's go ahead and pull that out and talk about it personally, or do it via email or something like that as well. So it empowers me to lead the meeting well. Of course, we're using the list view here, and let's just look at some of the different sections that I have created. First of all, we have our current agenda section. So the current agenda section is actually going to be, for our meeting. So let's say the meeting is today. Thursday is that when I'm recording this, and let's say today is my meeting. So this is theoretically going to be my agenda for today's meeting. And as we complete our meeting, of course, we'll knock these off and mark them as done. And hopefully by the end of our meeting, it will be completely done. Like, this will be empty. There'll be nothing else in here because we've knocked them all out. So this is our current agenda. The next one we have is future agenda. So what this is going to hold is this is going to hold upcoming or future agenda items that we want to talk about in an upcoming meeting. So you'll see that I've got two of them here that are going to be for this coming Wednesday. So about a week from now, these two items will be in the current agenda because that's when they're going to be due. October 18th, I've got an agenda item. And then way out April 2nd, months from when I'm recording this video at least, these items will also show up in the current agenda. So these are future agenda items. And incidentally, when I ask my team members if they want to add something, I ask them to add them to the future agenda. And then they're going to put the date in that they think is the most reasonable date for us to discuss that item. What's also nice about this is we can add more agenda items in here that might be way down the line. Maybe there's something we want to talk about in 4 months from now or 6 months from now. We can go ahead and put them into the future agenda. And in a little while, we'll talk about how we can use automations or rules so that Asana will automatically move these items into the current agenda when the date comes due for that item. So a great tool. We have action items. This is where we're going to, if we assign a task right in the middle of the meeting, then this is where we will go ahead and take care of that. We'll assign that task to somebody and we'll put it into action items so that we can follow up. So this is especially important if, as a team leader or departmental leader, if I want to make sure that we have some accountability with tasks that are assigned in the meeting, then I would put them into action items. Now, for me personally, I only put tasks in action items that I want to follow up in the meeting. Otherwise, I go ahead and assign it to them, put it into the project or workspace that it needs to be, and let them go ahead and take care of it. So this is just if we want to have that kind of 360 view, team-oriented follow-up for everyone. Then we have a place where we have minutes, and this is where we'll talk about how we can actually use Asana to maintain minutes. The advantage of keeping your minutes inside of Asana is they become searchable in the future. If I want to try to remember what in the world we discussed last year about a particular activity, I can come in here and search and hopefully find in the minutes that activity, and it's going to help us. And then finally, we've got our completed agenda. This is just where these current agenda items will go. Once we mark them as done, they'll automatically go into completed agenda with the automation that we've created. All right, so this kind of shows you these 5 sections. Let's just talk for a moment about the layout. You'll notice that I do not have any filter selected. This is by design. I could come in here and just say, just show me incomplete tasks, but really it's not necessary because I'm actually going to just tell Asana to move all these tasks into completed agenda. And then if I want to see those later on, I can always just pop over there and see them. We also have the ability to sort, and sometimes people will say, well, don't we want to sort by due date so that we can easily see when these tasks are due? And it sort of makes sense, but to be honest with you, I usually keep the sort turned off. The reason for that is all of these tasks here are due today. These are the tasks that we're going to focus on today. However, if I want to rearrange ad hoc or live, let's say during the meeting, maybe we're 10 minutes into the meeting and I look at the agenda and everyone's having a conversation and I realize, you know what, we need to adjust the agenda on the fly. I can't make any adjustments because it's sorted. So I leave that sort turned off so that I have the flexibility at any given time to say, you know what, actually once we finish following up on these action items, I want to go right to the retreat schedule and I want to talk about the annual conference. So I could just move them on the fly during the meeting. Most people don't even recognize or know it, but it gives me control, and so I keep that sort turned off. Of course, the other thing that I will do is once I have set a particular setup or something like that, I will come in here, and if I turn this sort off, I'll come in here and just click this save button and save for everyone so that everyone knows kind of what we're going to be doing. So I'll save that. If for some reason we really wanted to have to look at all this data differently, let's say that we wanted to filter by a particular agenda type or priority or something like that, we can always create a different view. For instance, let me just go ahead and maybe sort by priority. Now this is going to sort by priority. You can see high, medium, and low. But like if this is a view that I actually want to be able to see sometimes, I can see my current agenda and future, I can come in here and actually save this as a new tab, and it'll be right up here as a list tab, and I can change that. I can actually rename it to call priority. And then, so now I have the ability, and I can actually move that over if I want to. Sometimes we can drag and drop, but sometimes Asana doesn't work very well with that. That time it did. So I can drag and drop that over there, and now I have my regular list view, but for some reason I want to see the priority view for on occasion. That will help me as well. Going back to the list view, so we've saved that. We've kind of got the layout the way we want. Usually I like to save this view with all of the other sections collapsed and the current agenda expanded. And when I save that for everyone, now when the rest of my team members come into this meeting for the first time, this is what they see. It's clean, it's neat. We don't need to worry about or think about all of this other, gobbledygook that is important to us maybe down the line, but not today. So instead of making everyone kind of see or look at that, I just collapse them all, save the view, and then we're good to go. Now let's take a moment and look at the different columns that we see here. First of all, the first column is traditionally in a project management world, these are the task names. But because this is an evergreen kind of more of a reference project for our meeting agenda, these are actually not necessarily actionable tasks. They are agenda items. These are the conversations that we want to have during our meeting. So we have the agenda item there. And then over here, we'll see the facilitator. And this is not to be confused with the assignee. So if I want to, I can, come in here and find the assignee. Actually, oh, there it is right there, assignee. Usually they're at the top. I don't know why that's sorted that way. That's so funny. So we can have this assignee field. If I wanted to, I can say, the assignee is Donald, and I can assign that task to him. However, what that does when I use the assignee field is now it's going to create clutter for Donald. What that's going to do is that's going to put in Donald's, when he tries to go to my tasks, he's going to see that follow up on action items there, which is not really an actionable task for him. It's not something that he's supposed to be doing. It shouldn't be on his to-do list. And so we don't assign it to him, so it doesn't go into his to-do list. It's very important. Best practice in Asana is to reduce clutter for people's my tasks is you only assign tasks to them that are actionable. So we don't use the assignee column at all. So we'll hide that column. Instead, we're going to create a new custom column called facilitator. And here now we can, assign who's going to be the person who's going to lead that conversation. We can even add more than one person. If it's going to be a team of people that are going to be having that conversation, then we can go ahead and do that as well. Then we have the agenda type. You don't have to do this. I find it a little bit helpful to help me with context. So I've created several different types of agenda items. So we've got informational, which is just, getting information, finding out what the status is, or getting some information about something. And oftentimes we might put all those together. Maybe we'd say, hey, let's talk through all of our informational things first. Then we have decision needed. That's another option. So here we have two decisions that need to be made. And then we might just have some tactical conversations. In other words, laptop upgrades for the IT department. Someone wants to talk about that for a moment. Maybe they want to, talk about what the cost is going to be, or they have a question or something like that. It's just a tactical conversation. And then we have strategic, which are usually more drawn out and emotionally involved and require more effort and energy. But we have strategic conversations where we're making decisions or getting feedback or focusing on something that's going to have more of a long-term impact on our team, department, or organization. So we have these different agenda types. And again, you don't have to use that. I find it to be helpful. The next one is the due dates. And I do use Asana's due date field here. And the reason for that is because I want to implement a number of automations or rules so that Asana will do the work for me. I'm going to hire Asana to kind of triage and organize this data. So I have created a due date. I also have a priority field. And we don't have to do this, but I know some organizations do. So I went ahead and put this in here so we can kind of get a feel for what's important and what's not. And again, maybe we would go ahead and move these around and say, let's focus on the high priority items first. I don't know, but again, it just adds value as we're trying to focus on what we should do. And then the last field that I really encourage people to use is the time field. Now, when I say the time field, it's a custom field that I created, and these are various times in minutes that I'm estimating. I'm estimating it's going to take us 15 minutes to follow up on action items. Now I'm looking down at action items. There's actually no action items here. So, practically I'd actually probably say 0 or wouldn't even put that in here. But if there were action items, maybe I would estimate 15 minutes. Reviewing the schedule and the travel schedule, maybe 5 minutes each. These are going to be 15 minutes, 10 minutes. These strategic conversations are going to take a little longer. The advantage of this is I can very quickly see if we're going to have more marbles, as it were, in our circle than we have time in our recess, right? So in other words, our meeting is supposed to be a 90-minute marketing team meeting, but it turns out this is actually 115 minutes worth of information. So now, again, I'm empowered in advance to make some decisions. And maybe I would come in here and say, you know what, maybe we really shouldn't be, focusing on discussing the Asana project naming convention. Let's go ahead and move that over here to future agenda. And now I brought it down to 100 minutes. And so, I have 10 more minutes. Let's let laptop upgrades. That is high priority. What are we going to do? Maybe we can just do that via email, or we'll just go ahead and move that into future agenda as well. Okay, so we can, make some determinations there and just kind of clean things up a little bit. And so now I'm down to 90 minutes and I feel good about this agenda. And hopefully by the time our meeting is over, we have completed all our agenda items. Okay. Now, I'm going to jump over here into future and just grab those 2 items. For the remainder of this demo, we're going to pop them back in here, even though it's taking more time than we want. All right, now, we have talked about the various custom fields and comments and things. We've talked about how we're using this. This is an active live conversation that's happening in our meeting. And so let's talk about some of the different things that we can do in these sections down here. So action items, again, this is something that's happening ad hoc during the meeting. So maybe while we're talking about, let's see here, this new location in Tampa, the conversation comes up during this strategic conversation and say, well, I've been in contact with a realtor, but I haven't heard from them in a while. So we might come down here and say, hey, follow up with realtor in Tampa to get some status on what's going on, with some land that we're trying to buy, or a property. So we've done that. Let's go ahead and assign that to Jesse. And this is actually not an agenda. This is an actual task that Jesse has. And so I'm going to give it a due date, and we'll come over here and say, I actually want her to report back to us by the 5th. So it's the due date for the task, but it's also when we're going to discuss it in our next meeting. Now, you might notice something that I did here by accident. I assigned to facilitator, I assigned this to Jesse. But again, I didn't assign it to her. So I have to go into the task and make sure I assign it to her. This is one thing we do have to remember so that it'll show up in her to-do list. Otherwise, next week's going to get here and she'll be like, sorry, I forgot, right? And so we can set priority if we want, all these other things. But these fields are related to my team meeting agenda. The key here is that she has been assigned something, and because we want to follow up and find out what happened in our next team meeting, which is next week, we're going to go ahead and put it into action items. Okay, that's what that's going to be. And incidentally, I've also created a rule that says when October 5th gets here, Asana will automatically move this item into the current agenda, so nobody has to remember. It'll automatically go into the current agenda. In fact, when it goes into the current agenda, it will also add to the agenda type an action item right here. This will be called an action item. I don't have to make it an action item because I've told Asana to automatically give it the agenda type of action item when we roll it up there. Okay, so let's talk for a moment about the minutes and how we might process minutes. So there are a lot of different ways that organizations keep minutes. The traditional way is, a Microsoft Word document or some kind of PDF or something like that we have in our storage space. And of course, what my experience has been that when we do that, it's really hard to, get historical. It's hard to go back, a year or 2 years to say, remember that conversation we had 2 years ago about branding? What did we decide? I thought we decided to go with this one company, and what happened with that? And so now we're like searching through and trying to find the minute for that, and it can be very cumbersome. So one thing that some organizations will do is they'll actually take the minutes right inside of Asana. There's many ways that we can do that. Of course, we can attach, so I've created some tasks down here that are actually reference tasks. And so September 27th, actually today's September 28th, right? So, this is a reference task, but inside of the task, I can go ahead if I want to and write the minutes. So just, start typing the minutes. I can have whoever my minute taker is and start focusing on the minutes. And maybe I'll make a bullet point and, say, we decided to check up on the location in Tampa, contacting the realtor. Right, so I'm writing a minute or whatever that might be, and we'll add some more text in here. Maybe I'll just put in some fake text right now. And so I'm putting some information in here. So what's meaningful about this is down the line, let's say 6 months or something, somebody's like, hey, remember that conversation about Tampa with a realtor? What did we decide? So we can just come into the search, and what we can do is we can search minutes because we know the name of the task is going to have minutes. And then we're going to go ahead and search maybe realtor. And so, or maybe I'll just go ahead and search lorem ipsum, right? That was some of ipsum. Let's see if I can put that in there. And when I do that, I see right over here, September 28 minute. And I come in here, and there it is. There's my lorem ipsum. So it pulled in from that text. I don't know. We'll just say realtor, for instance, if we want to. We can say realtor instead. And we'll put in, there it is, September 28 minute. And I'm finding that one line item right now. And it helps me. So I don't have to figure out what date it was or anything else. So this is one of the things that I really like about keeping the minutes directly in your team meeting is it is searchable down the road. All right, so the last thing we just really want to talk about here is now that we know how to organize and lead our meeting, let's talk about some of the automations that I have created to just kind of streamline things a little better. The first automation I'll just mention is a very simple one. When I mark a task as done, it's going to just go ahead and jump it down to the completed agenda item. So I'll go ahead and expand that. There's nothing in there right now, but this, discuss Asana project naming conventions. We had that conversation. A decision was made. I mark it as done. Asana's going to go ahead and put that down there for me. So theoretically, when I'm all done, my current agenda will be empty. So that one's an easy one. The other thing that I did was I created a rule that said, hey, when the due date becomes today, when the due date turns into today, go ahead and move these agenda items up into current agenda. So Asana is basically going to create the current agenda for our next meeting for me based on this information down here. And then the morning of or the day of that meeting, I'll come in here and clean it up and organize it and decide, oh, maybe we need to change the due date. So that is another one that we do. Same thing. I did the same thing with action items. If there's an action item in here and there's a due date, tell Asana go ahead and move it up into current agenda. So on October the 5th, this will become an actual agenda item. And I told Asana specifically to do that and change the agenda type to action item so that when that happens, I can very easily see in red, this is an actual action item that we're following up on. And then again, I might say, you know what, I realized, Jessie was actually sick this week. She's not even gonna have time to have done that. Let's go ahead and move that to the 12th. And then we'll go ahead and pop that back down to action items, give her a little bit more time to focus on that. All right, so these are decisions that are being made as we're trying to process this information live. Now, the last thing that we have is we actually have the ability to have recurring tasks. So sometimes there's things that we just want to do every single week. For instance, maybe every week we want to follow up on action items. So I actually created this little recurring icon here just to kind of help me see that this is something that happens on a recurring basis. Now, traditionally in Asana, what we would do is we would just go ahead and, in fact, let me just, let's take this new location in Tampa and let's make this one recurring for a moment. Because this one here is already, I've got some code associated with it. But let's go ahead and make it recurring. We can set this thing to repeat and we say, weekly, and that's fine. So you'd think that that would work out just fine. I've made this a recurring task. The problem is what behavior I'm looking for is when I mark something as done, like this laptop upgrades, I want it to go away. I want the current agenda to slowly get smaller and smaller until we're all done. The problem with this is because this is recurring, I mark it as done. Asana is going to go ahead and move this particular task down to completed agenda, but because it's recurring, Asana is going to go ahead and bring it back in, and now I have the same task in here due next week. And so I don't want it in here. Now I have to manually move it over to future agenda, and that's not what I was hoping for. That's not the behavior I'm hoping for. So I'm going to actually tell you a way to cheat the system a little bit. We're going to use rules to make this recurring instead, and these are the recurring rules. So what I did was, and again, this is a little bit more complex, but not too difficult, I actually created a custom field called custom trigger. I usually keep it hidden. Nobody can see it, but I know it's here. And inside here, I've got recurring weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annually. So I've got two items that are recurring on a weekly basis, follow-up action items, and review the travel schedule. Review annual retreat schedule. That one's actually going to recur annually, so just once a year. And then I've also got right in here, looks like, I lost it. That I already marked it as done. Oh, I missed it. So I also had one that I must have accidentally, right here, quarterly goals. That one should be happening maybe on a monthly basis. We want to, look at a recurring goal. So we can see these four here are recurring. So what do we do? Well, first of all, let's pop into our rules. And, here's some of the rules that we've created. When the task is due today, move it to current agenda. We already discussed that one. This one here is when the task is moved to when the task is in the current agenda section and it's marked as complete, go ahead and move it, completed agenda. Okay, so these are some of the basic ones. But let's go to the very bottom and look at what happens when we, for instance, if the task is, that's the task, that's the rule for that one here. Okay, so if the task is, that's actually an advanced one too. I'll jump to the right one here. Right here. Okay, here we go. So if the task has a custom trigger set to recurring weekly and the task is marked as complete, so instead of having this task move to the completed section, I'm actually going to tell Asana to just do some work. In other words, I'm going to say, mark that task as incomplete, but move it into the future agenda section and then reset the due date for 7 days. In other words, I made it recurring, but I also made it move to the section that I want. So I kind of cheated Asana and did my own version of recurring. We can do that for weekly, for monthly, for annually, etc. And again, it just creates my own version of a recurring task, but it gives me the behavior that I want. And then the last rule that I've created that I almost forgot to mention to you is I created another rule. And once you create these, they're all done. But I created another rule that says, what are we going to do if, because this happens a lot, we're in our meeting on the fly, nobody's really thinking, and I'm saying, hey, you know what, we're not going to have time to decide on the date for the conference. And so what will happen is somebody will just drag it into future agenda. Well, the problem with that is because that's due today, this task will never jump up to current agenda ever again, because tomorrow it's going to be, a day overdue, right? And then the next day it'll be 2 days overdue, et cetera, et cetera. So this task will never jump up. So what I've done is I've actually created another rule that says, hey, listen, if a task is in future agenda and the due date is 1 day overdue, go ahead and change that due date to 6 days from that moment. Right? So I don't know if that made sense to you, but of course tomorrow this task will be 1 day overdue. And so what I want Asana to do is change the due date to 6 days from tomorrow when Asana sees that it's overdue, which will be on the 5th, and so it'll automatically move it to the next week's agenda. So the assumption is that if I move it into future agenda, we probably want to talk about it next week. So again, it sounds a little complicated, but once you set it up, it's all up and running, and we've got everything happening the way we want it to. So right here, when a task is moved to future agenda and it's overdue by 1 day, then just leave it in future agenda, but set the due date to 6 days. All right, I think that we have discussed everything. What's this one? Task is moved to action item and the task is due today. Move the task to a certain section, current agenda, and set the agenda type to action item. I mentioned that rule as well. All right, so I think that finishes things up. So now when we're done, and we'll just kind of test that right now, we'll see follow up on action items weekly, and we'll just mark that as done and mark that one as done. We'll see those will pop right up over into here. There they are. They just popped into there. Boom, boom. And this monthly one is going to do the same thing, and that'll pop over there. And so now we have completed all of our conversations, and we're feeling good. All the marbles are out of the circle, and everyone leaves the meeting feeling like, hey, we accomplished something. We rock, right? And so we have finished. So I hope you have found this video helpful, right? How to use Asana to lead great meetings. And there was a lot of content here, but once we've set everything up, it's going to run pretty smoothly for us. It's going to help us be able to focus on what we want to focus on. That is the meeting and leading a great meeting, hopefully. And we'll talk about that maybe another time in another video. All right, so I hope you found this super helpful. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like, feel free to subscribe to this channel to get more tips and tricks on how we can be productive and lead well and use Asana effectively. Again, thanks so much for watching. Have a great, great